Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics. In association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable brought to you by First Star Therapy. I'm your host, James Gardner, and this is a platform for the pros, by the pros. Passionate pros, organic dialogue. Let's chat. Thanks for listening. Let's roll. All right, and away we go. Here we go. Special edition, First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable brought to you by First Star Therapy and Mobility Tape, the only heat-activated kinesiology tape on the market, in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapy Association. Two special guests today, a special edition as mentioned. It's a Friday afternoon, a little bit snowy here. Snow on the ground where Kayla is, but not necessarily snowing actively at this point. Dr. Kayla Fujimoto-Epperson is a sports physical therapist who is passionate about providing athletes with the sports-specific care they need and deserve. Her experiences in sport and her time as a Division I tennis player at Indiana University have greatly impacted her professional career. Throughout her tennis career, she suffered a number of sports-related overuse injuries. During her junior season, she underwent 2 different surgeries before coming back for her final year. Her experiences being injured and unable to play the sport she loves have made her passionate about helping athletes with sport-specific injury prevention, rehabilitation, and return to play performance training. Outside of sports, Kayla loves to connect with other professionals who are passionate about what they do. After graduating from Indiana University, she pursued her doctorate of physical therapy at Northern Illinois University, where she graduated with highest honors. During her final year of graduate school, she completed a clinical internship with Emory University Sports Medicine and Dr. Neer Jayanthi, hope I said that right, of the Emory Tennis Medicine Program. Since graduating, she's completed a Tennis Serve Biomechanics Fellowship with Dr. Mark Kovacs, and she also serves on the board of directors for the Society of Tennis Medicine and Science. She loves to coach and mentor students and early career professionals who are interested in pursuing careers in sports physical therapy or entrepreneurship. She's been an invited speaker to national and international sports medicine conferences, featured on multiple podcasts and blogs. She enjoys playing tennis and spending time with her husband and 2 black labs, Emery and Belle. She's also committed to volunteering for Leader Dogs for the Blind through puppy raising and serving their mission to empower people who are blind or visually impaired with lifelong skills for safe and independent travel. She can be reached at www.theathleteconnectionpt.com, www.tennishealthpro.com, and on Instagram at theathleteconnection. Kristin Bignell is our second guest. She is a registered physical therapist, neurofunctional sports performance practitioner, and neurofunctional acupuncture provider with a special interest in working with youth and varsity female athletes. She's also an instructor in training with a McMaster Contemporary Medical Acupuncture Program and a sports physiotherapy certificate candidate. She played NCAA Division I volleyball at the University at Buffalo, where she completed a degree in exercise science before attending the University of Toronto for her master's in physical therapy. Her experience with sport and injury are what led her to pursue a career in physical therapy and why she is so passionate about empowering athletes in their health and sport. In 2020, she opened her own physiotherapy practice, East Mill Physio in Elora, Ontario. And in 2021, she started ACE Performance, an online education and consulting business for youth and varsity female volleyball players. Her overall mission is to support lifelong athleticism through integrative physical therapy and educational services. Kayla, Kristin, thank you so much for being here. The bios speak volumes, but in our brief interactions, your personality, your passions shine through, and obviously like a directive focus at this point in time in terms of what you're doing and where you're going. Let's start with maybe how you know each other, because I know neither one of you, but you connected, we've connected together because you two know each other. So how did that work?
Yeah, first, thanks for having us on. Thanks for the introduction. I actually met Kristin through my business coach, Julie Granger. I was looking for a physio in the Toronto area for Mission Elite Performance tennis that I'm involved in. And, her name came up. And so we connected on social media and have kind of kept in touch ever since.
Awesome. I think this is it. Like, this is amazing that we're coming on here together. I'm an athletic therapist by trade, both physical therapists on your side. Strip away any certifications and any ego from the equation, and we have passion. We have the vision to empower athletes and to provide, what athletes deserve. I think so nicely put in both your bios. Kristin, how did things start for you? Obviously, you played a little bit. How did the passion transition over to wanting to help others on your end? And then Kayla, will come back around to you, sort of finding the starting point for you. And then let's jump into all the things that you're doing.
Like you were saying, in my bio, I played NCAA Division I volleyball at the University at Buffalo. Kind of starting even before then, I had a number of different like minor sort of overuse injuries that kind of were brushed off. The main injury that I usually talk about was my sophomore year. I ended up with a herniated disc, which resulted in me having back surgery. Went through recovery for that, and I, at that time, had a little bit of an interest in physical therapy, but I was more so thinking of pursuing like the medical route, like becoming like going to med school. And I wanted to be a pediatrician, so mostly working with like younger sort of, like I envisioned myself working with younger sort of probably normally developing kids. I applied to med school and physio school, and physio was my backup, and I got into physio, and my plan was to eventually go to med school. But as soon as I got into physio, I loved it. Yeah, pretty much right from the first week. And so I kind of like, when I started working, I ended up having a lot of younger athletes, and I noticed a difference in kind of the way that my female athletes would present with injuries. There was a lot of differences. They were often trickier to kind of navigate. And as I started to dive deeper into why that was, I started reflecting back on my experience through sport. And there were many sort of key times that I could think of or pick out where things probably should have gone very differently for me. And so I sort of developed this passion for helping support. I primarily enjoy, if I were to pick my sort of favorite population, not that I have favorite clients, I like all my clients equally.
Yeah,
but if
of course.
My favorite population would be, like I said, like the kind of tween-teen female athlete. And basically like my kind of guiding kind of the phrase that guides me is that I want to be the person that I needed when I was that girl, like growing up through sport. And so I really enjoy learning all of the different things that make young female athletes different, and then sharing that information with my clients so that they can understand kind of what's happening, but they also then have the information to know if something is not right, or if something, if something's off, so that they can then advocate for themselves, because it's getting better and there's a lot more information out there and people are more aware of like what female athletes need. But still, like we still, all of us, I think, still need to do better, can do better. And so I really enjoy giving that information to my younger clients so that they can advocate for themselves and what they need.
Awesome. No, a great share, and that piece of sort of creating the advocacy in the individual, empowering them with your story and your experiences. And I love that, like trying to be the person that you needed at the time that you may not have had, right? Like that's, it's so powerful as a practitioner to be able to step back, see that, and then act on it now. So thank you for sharing. I think it's an amazing piece. It's certainly a large piece of what you're doing, but not all that you're doing. We'll come back around to that because I have a couple more questions on specific to that, your experiences. Kayla, how about you? How did you sort of find the profession? I mean, I know you played, obviously you had a couple injuries as well. Where did the transition happen from, student, and I'm going to go into this field?
Yeah. So I think a lot of us in this field are, driven by helping a former version of ourselves. So I have a very similar experience as Kristin did in sports. And actually mine started much younger. I was like an 11 and 12-year-old tennis athlete. I had a knee injury and I was out of my sport for a year, and I went to many different doctors. I even had a sports medicine doctor tell me I would never play tennis again or any sort of competitive sports. So that was my first kind of experience in healthcare, which was kind of alarming, and I didn't quite understand what was going on at that age. And so thankfully, my parents advocated for me. We continued to see other doctors, and finally found someone that was willing to treat me as the kid, like sitting in front of them and not just through my imaging. And that was my first experience going to physical therapy after that. I spent many months in PT, and I had a great experience. I returned to sport, loved my PTs. They made it really fun for me and empowered me with different exercises and support so that I could get back to playing tennis. And I wrote my 7th grade career report on physical therapy, and that's when I decided I wanted to be a PT. And thankfully, I never changed my mind after that. And then again, going to Indiana University and playing on the tennis team there, I mean, I had a great experience, but I did run into more overuse injuries, and I ended up having 2 different surgeries during my junior year. And, being out that whole year was a huge challenge for me. And then also kind of looking back and knowing what I know now, and after dedicating time into studying more tennis medicine and injury prevention for overuse injuries, and just the prevalence of overuse injury in female athletes specifically, I would have handled some of those situations differently. I know hindsight is 2020, but again, I'm taking that information that I know now and that drive and passion to not be an advocate for tennis players, and then also just sport specific care that really takes into account like the demands of the athlete, and especially their mindset when they're out from their sport, because I have experienced so many long periods away from sport, and that can be a huge challenge too. So that drove me into continuing to pursue my physical therapy degree. And then now in my career, I really wanted to specialize in working with athletes, and especially tennis and baseball players is the population I primarily work with now. And I started the Athlete Connection last year also, like in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah. Nice.
And I've just been loving it, and really like the freedom to kind of treat the athletes the way I want them to be treated, and giving them that care really specific care that I think they deserve too.
Yeah, it's awesome. And some really good insights just from the first couple minutes here of some of the things that, I mean, I've been practicing for nearly 15 years now in various capacities, and it's taken me this long to sort of see some of the writing on the wall and start to connect the dots to what really matters, and finding a vision and a philosophy of care more so than all the modalities and tips and tricks and all these other things. And the philosophy that jumps out from both of you sort of semi-synonymously is utilizing your lived experiences to dictate how you're going to provide care for another. And I think that's amazing to be treated like the kid you are in the room and not the images. I'm working with student therapists now at Sheridan College here in the Toronto area. And that's one thing that I deliver all the time when we're going through our practical sort of coursework is like, the one thing that's going to matter at the end of the day is your ability to connect with the human being, not getting the diagnosis right, not doing the coolest thing that's on the internet right now, none of those things. And Kristin, you touched on a few really interesting pieces, but both of you at sort of what we would look at in Canada, you know, Division I schools, that's like where most athletes want to get to, you know, from Canada. They want to go on scholarship. They want to be able to play Division I. You both did it. How was your experience as an athlete in a Division I school? Kristin, you're Canadian, so like you went to the US. How was your experience? And then Kayla, we'll come back around to your experience as an athlete as a D1. Is there sort of like a dividing factor when you're on campus? That's an athlete. You have some elevated status, some elevated expectations. I don't know. Overall, how was your experience at Buffalo?
Yeah, so it was great. It is really crazy going from here to playing, the D1 school. You do feel like a celebrity in a way. I don't know if it's like that for everyone, but definitely coming from Canada, like playing in like growing up in our sporting system and then going down and playing there, it was a bit of a shock, but it was great. I overall had a really good experience. Obviously, with injury, like there were some very tough times. But yeah, it's a lot more intense. Like it is very intense, I would say. Like the expectations of you, you're kind of. I was 17 too when I went down there. You're very much. Yeah, you're like you're treated well, but also they do dictate kind of how you live your life.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're sort of boxed in, right? Like to some degree, there are some expectations and some things you have to follow. You know, I never went Division I, but I had always had dreams of playing pro and ended up playing Division II baseball for out of high school and then transferred back to Canada. But, you know, there are some differences, you know, moving from Canada to the US where there's a heightened emphasis on sport and performance and all these different things. So that lived experience, I'm sure, plays a role with your high level, you know, volleyball players and athletes that you see that are in that tween-teen stage, and disseminating some of that for them, I think is also beneficial, like huge for athletes to have that insight. Kayla, how about you? When you're at Indiana University, big Division I school, a tennis program there. How was your experience as an athlete? You touched on, you know, a couple surgeries and looking back on those, but as an overall experience, how was that?
Oh yeah, I loved Indiana. It was an amazing experience. And you know, one of the things my parents always told me is during the recruiting process is when I was looking at school was, you know, if you're hurt and you're unable to play your sport, are you still going to like being at that school? Because that is a huge part of your experience and there's identity attached to it. And it actually happened for me where I was out of my sport for a whole year. So thankfully I took that advice to heart when I got onto campus and I knew I was picking a school because of the education that I would receive there, the resources there, and just like, you know, love being on campus. And then within sports, I know you mentioned like the whole celebrity thing. Like I think, you know, at some big D1 schools at programs, you are kind of a celebrity as an athlete. But I know that Indiana, with the athletic department, worked really hard to be inclusive with campus and integrated in campus. So, you know, we didn't live in separate athletic dorms. They tried to keep us rooted within the general student population. And I really enjoyed that so that, you know, I didn't have kind of like these blinders on to what real life actually was like on a college campus.
Yeah.
But again, and then my freshman year was really interesting. I was the only American on my team. And so that was a whole nother cool experience just to be a part of, you know, with teammates that were from different countries and learning that and traveling with them and just different habits and things that they had. So that was fun. And but yeah, I loved my experience there. I mean, I had my wedding there, like we deeply rooted into my experiences at Indiana. And if you have the opportunity to be a student athlete, I think definitely take it because it can open up a lot of different doors and for you.
Yeah, I love that. And if you're hurt or if you can't play, are you still enjoying your experience? I think, I just got off a call with a partner of mine, and we've put together some programming in terms of performance wellness. And what we're looking at doing is sort of reshaping the focus of sport to putting, the human first, because you're going to human for a long time after you're going to athlete. And so what happens when that ends, and like, how do we enhance that experience, but still enhance performance while being that athlete, right? While you're at least identifying as that. Now, listen, like, I want to take this in a little bit of a different direction, because your pieces that you both posted through social media channels, and that was my entryway to both of you. The females working with, and more importantly for, as sort of like the catalyst of change for focus on female sports and female athletes. I have an opportunity to work with some very high level female athletes. And the one thing that I love about them is, like, let's just strip away the word female. Like, you're an athlete. So one of our Hockey Canada women came into the gym, into the facility that we work in, and she had this amazing shirt on, and it said female athlete, but female was crossed out, and it was just athlete. Talk
Yeah,
to
that's
sort of
from the Playa Society. I love their stuff, so check them out.
yeah, no, great plug. And I just thought it spoke volumes to me, because I've spent predominantly the majority of my career with male athletes, professional baseball, and then into football program at a Canadian university, and then oversaw, and then transitioned to a clinic that was seeing, the total varsity population, and then now whatever. But speaking to and for female athletes it's not a different language, but like, what are some of the things that you highlight in doing so, Kristin? Maybe starting with you, in terms of like, what are the important things that you want to deliver? You are a female, you are an athlete, you are a human. Like, where do you start with, maybe to make this a little bit more succinct, like with those tweens or teenagers, like, what are some of the driving lessons that you want to impart with working with that population?
I think kind of the main thing, Kayla shared some of these stats on Instagram when we were celebrating for National Girls and Women's in Sports Day, but kind of around that age, you see a much higher dropout of girls in sport than you do in boys. And a lot of that can be attributed to the changes that they sort of experience through puberty. You get changes in their self-esteem. They might have like difficulty kind of adjusting to some of those changes. And I think one of the best things we can do is provide information to those young girls so that they can understand like what is happening, right? Because that's good information. They can understand what is normal, what might not be normal, and if there is something that's not normal, like where they can look for solutions. Because I think sometimes we normalize different things that female athletes experience that aren't necessarily normal, and there are solutions to them. And so, yeah, giving them that sort of information. And then also you'll see like during that time, like the changes that boys experience help with their sports performance. Whereas in girls, like they'll, their pelvis is changing shape, which affects their, like the way their lower limb biomechanics are, the way their deep core can function. And also the changing hormone levels as their bodies are trying to adjust to that. They're like trying to deal with like getting their period and like navigating that in sport. And so just giving them that information and then being a source of support and helping to guide them if they need other healthcare providers helping to support that part of the system, so that they don't feel like like, oh, my performance has gone down, like they get into that like negative self-talk, which doesn't need to happen, and just so that they can understand that those changes are temporary, and that things will level out if they stay the course, and that really those changes are actually good things, and they're signs of health, and we can support them through that.
Yeah, so some great insights, and you talk about some of the posting, and if you're not following, follow Kristin and Kayla. We'll let you guys throw your handles out there as we go through this. But 2 times the rate of boys in terms of dropouts during by age 14. So that's a significant stat. And then, the obviously less opportunities and all these kinds of things that you posted and talked about. But in listening to this, I'm thinking like this takes a specialist, like this takes somebody who's probably experienced this to deal with these kinds of things. And this takes somebody who's well informed. And this has to be more than just sort of, I graduated school with this title and I'm going to deal with this population. Like this is a specialized population. This is a population that makes up, let's call it 50% of the teenage population, the tween-age population. And like, it takes a special focus due to all of the changes you just touched on. So the fact that you guys are pushing this, I think is amazing. And I think it is understudied in school. We probably don't spend a whole lot of time looking at this, and then we shift over and look at the opportunity sides of things, and it's part and parcel. It becomes sort of part of the language. Is like the expectation is it's just not going to happen at those higher levels on the same, and looking at sort of equity and equality and talking about those languages and the move for opportunity. We have the Dream Gap tour here, like with the PWHPA. We get a lot of exposure to that in Canada with like what's going on with a movement to sort of push to equity, or these kinds of things in hockey, and a lot of the NHL people are now supporting, and we're seeing some more alignment through COVID and the pandemic that may or may not have happened if it wasn't present, with say like the Maple Leafs housing a game, and how the Blackhawks in Chicago, right, like in your area, is starting to align with the PWHPA. And I think, yeah, it's got to start at the top, but really if it starts at the bottom and works its way up, that may be a better solution, like foundationally moving. And I think some really good points as a practitioner, and then on the whole scale of like the sporting space. So Kayla, how about you with female population? Do you specify, do you work just with females? Do you work with both? And if you're working with females, some either add on or touch on some new things that Kristin had touched on?
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. It does take a specialist to be able to, notice these things in your young female athletes, and also some more training. But again, I think we need to get better at normalizing asking about period health and menstrual health, and eating habits and body image. And it can be uncomfortable to ask those questions as a provider. And so it's easy to just avoid it as if it's not happening, because most teenage girls aren't going to bring those things up themselves. But if you at least create the environment to make it feel safe to do so and to start having those conversations, it can make a huge impact on them as a human being, but also in their sport. And so I primarily right now I'm working with a lot of teenage boys, which is a whole other story. But I think as a clinician, being really good at opening up the opportunity to communicate those things is important. Even if you're not, well versed in it, then reach out to colleagues that are and be able to refer appropriately. Other things that can pop up, and I experienced this, as a college athlete, most of my teammates had some sort of disordered eating or poor body image in college. And I think a lot of the college athletes in sports where their clothing is, more revealing, like in volleyball and swimming, water polo, athletes like that, like there can be a lot more issues related to body image and mental health. And so, we're not those aren't our fields or fields of expertise, but being able to advocate for the athlete and empower them and say, hey, I think you could really benefit from, going to see someone else who specializes in this. At least we're giving them all the resources and working kind of as an interdisciplinary team to give that athlete everything that they would need.
Yeah, and both, fantastic in terms of the insight that you've had to this point, and the impact that you are having and will continue to have just by having these conversations, right? And being in a relationship or maturing or looking back through your experiences and acknowledging that those uncomfortable conversations usually reveal the greatest outputs, and getting comfortable with that discomfort is sort of a talking point that we use now in training, not necessarily to get under the bar and get hurt, but get into some training areas, get into some areas of movement that you haven't been to, and like really trust that your body and you can house a whole lot more. But bringing it back around to the conversation piece, this is it, like talking about menstruation and understanding that. And if you're simply by asking the questions may open the door, but obviously it has to be a safe environment, right? That's fair. And at the same time pushing either being an expert in those fields or at least having a network of people that you can refer out to for, altered eating or, eating disorders, dealing with menstruation and the menstrual cycle and training. And like I listened to a podcast a while ago. It was Kelly Starrett and I think his wife was on, and they were talking about this population and how, like, if you're a strength coach and you're programming for a female athlete who's having her period, like, you better know when that is, but like, how do you approach that conversation to periodize a program during that phase? You know what I mean? And as a male or as a female, like, is this something that's not standard, right? Like, in your experience as an athlete, did anybody ever say, like, when is your menstrual cycle happening? Because we're going to tailor your program to, nope, never, right? So talk about that. Is that if you want to, or if you don't, is that something that you would push in terms of like educating coaches or strength personnel, or how do we begin to bridge that gap to make that a conversation? Because it is one that has to be had.
Yeah,
Kristin, take this one.
Well, I think it's becoming more, people are becoming more open about talking about that, but I definitely think that it is 100% like an essential conversation to be had, like, for anyone who's involved in like the healthcare performance sort of training side of things for any female athlete. Because one, like, just on a basic health level, like, knowing what their cycle is like is it's an indicator of overall health. So if there's any changes in that can give a good, like, can oftentimes be one of the first signs that something might not be going well. And then also, yeah, it should be guiding training. I think female athletes should understand, like, have a greater understanding, more so than like beyond just what day of their cycle they're on. They should understand like how that affects them, because everyone's going to be a little bit different. Like, their cycle is going to affect them a little bit differently.
Right.
But I absolutely think that it should be a conversation. And then the other thing I just don't want to forget to say, because I do think it's important for female athletes, is that we should be asking about leaking as well. Like, I think coaches and like, because I think I know it's a very common thing that happens in female athletes, which would be a sign that there is some sort of core dysfunction. But again, that kind of becomes normalized, and people don't ask about it, and they're not going to voluntarily offer up that information. So this would be kind of two areas.
Yeah, amazing. And Kayla, in terms of entryway to this topic, how might you advise somebody who hasn't had these conversations to sort of, I'm listening to this podcast and these two females who are great practitioners, who are working with this population, who know this population, who have been this population, are delivering all this great information, but like, I'm me and I've never had this conversation. Can I put that in an anonymous survey? Can I put that out there on like a questionnaire, an entry questionnaire, a wellness questionnaire? Like, how do I ask a female athlete about that in order to access that when it comes to programming or treatment? Is that a first day conversation? Is that a month into getting to know this athlete? Where do you feel that might have most impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be point of contact, your first point of contact, because it is going to impact maybe your clinical decision making, or your decision making as when you're doing strength conditioning programming. But a good entryway to get into it is looking more into RED-S, or relative energy deficiency in sports. And there are some good screening tools out there that you can use to start screening for, energy deficiency in your female athletes. And there are validated screening tools out there that you can provide, those tools can ask the questions and open up that conversation. And you can, talk about why you're asking those questions, and, how it ties into performance, wellness, but also like rehab recovery too. And overall just wellness of the female athletes. That would be a good place to start.
Yeah, beautiful. Great entryways. And I think, like, just again, starting the conversation and allowing people to normalize this, right? To have this, like, there's no point in not talking about it because it's a big factor. So we should be addressing it just like we're addressing, look, your elbow is not fully flexing. Like, it's more important than your elbow not fully flexing. So we should probably have this on the dialogue early on. Beautiful. And then in terms of integrative medicine, integrative specialties, you guys work with various athletes, female, male, doesn't really really matter. Do you both believe in sort of like referring out, referring in, practitioner title or certification relevant or not relevant? How does that play in your field? Interdisciplinary or sort of crossover, is that a part of your practices?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially like in working with female athletes, I think a lot of times if they do have like underlying health issues that are contributing to their pain issue or their injury, like it's absolutely necessary to refer them off to other health providers that can help. And I'm not really like title doesn't really play into things. It's whatever kind of the experience of the practitioner is. So yeah, for me, it's not really about title. It's about what that individual needs, and then I'll refer them out to whoever I think can best help with that.
100%. That athlete-centric model, I think, it sort of flips things around as we're coming through. As I've always found that I don't know, it's not like it's streamlined into us, but it's sort of like, how do I keep my patients coming back to me because that's going to pay my bills, as opposed to this patient is going to keep coming back to me if I'm providing them with the best possible care, and that includes a community. You know, it takes a village, right? So Kayla, how about you? Are you in a space where you have other practitioners or all PTs or just yourself? Where does your practice look like at this point?
Yeah, so for my practice, it's just me as the PT, but I think if we're serving athletes in general, female, male, whatever, even just a general population client, we have to be willing, to make it all about the person in front of you. And it's not about you as a provider. It's about that person sitting in front of you and providing them with all the resources and the best care that they would need. And so I don't want to be a specialist in everything. That's too much pressure. I'd like to focus on, what I'm most passionate about and good at. And then when I do need help, an interdisciplinary team, like bringing those people in and, referring those people out so that they have all the resources that they need to reach their goals. And same with strength and conditioning. It's so important to be in direct communication with them, especially with return to sport. That's a good area where I'm able to refer out to people that I know and trust and can help the athlete, and definitely take a more collaborative over competitive approach when I'm, working with other colleagues and people in the healthcare space.
Yeah, no, great stuff. And I think that goes such a long way. I'm just keep writing down notes, picking up this pad of paper and just writing like all of these things that we're talking about, because I think it's amazing stuff, and the shares are warranted and valuable. Really appreciate your time in taking, this time to chat and deliver sort of what you're doing and who you are and why this is important. Because the more people that hear it, I think we can continue to build that collaborative space and eliminate that competitive space. Is ultimately this is what it's about, is connecting with who's in the room, not with anything beyond that, really. Shifting a little bit to that specialization piece, like you've been an athlete, I've been an athlete. Specialization seems to be, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of good information out there, but there's also like the general perception of information that like my kid needs to start skating and playing 7 days a week of hockey, and because he's going to be the next, or she's going to be the next Cassie Campbell, or the next, whoever it's going to be. We know as practitioners that that's not actually the case, and actually quite the opposite. Same thing. How can we shift that dialogue? Or are you guys having conversations? Do you believe in the power of like getting in a room with coaches and saying like, not necessarily what you're doing is wrong, but like it's a tough conversation to have when there are sort of old heads in the room that believe in 7 days a week and driving athletes into the ground in order to enhance performance. And I think all well intentioned, just the impact is maybe not quite matching that intention. So how do we begin those conversations? Do you guys have these on a regular basis? Do you have a forum for that where we can relay quality information about specialization and how much is too much to athletes. Female, male, doesn't really matter. Specialization is a thing that we talk about. And you talked about, Kayla, not being a specialist in all things, which is as it comes to one sport. Kristin, your take on that in terms of, do you see this a lot? Do you try to deliver that, maybe some time away from taking your arm overhead and really hammering down on an object that is not natural to the human body? We should probably take some time away from that and do some other things.
Well, I think Kayla can speak nicely to this because she did a whole week on sports specialization on Instagram this week. But yeah, for me, just generally in practice, I will screen for like specialization. And if I do have someone like a younger athlete that is very specialized, we'll do more. So I'll do more like movement screening to see if they are developing sort of those other foundational movement skills that they might not be getting directly from their sport. I'll educate the parent on kind of the risks associated and some like, potential alternatives. And then I will, like, if they're specialized, like I might do more of like a performance care type follow-up with them where I like see them a little bit more regularly just to screen for like signs of overuse injury or just to make sure they're developing like okay through their sport.
Yeah.
So, I do screen and then I'll do education and kind of talk through alternatives and then try to support them as best as possible with like the like exercise programming, or it depends on the individual, but Kayla can probably speak nicely to this.
Yeah, jump in, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of my mentors, Dr. Neer Janthi, he's one of the first people to kind of define and help figure out how to quantify sports specialization. And so he created the Janthi scale for sports specialization, and it involves 4 different questions so that we can start identifying level of specialization in our youth athletes. And so the questions are, can you pick a main sport? 2, did you quit all other sports so that you could play one sport? And then 3, do you play your sport more than 8 months out of the year? And then the last question is, did you quit or specialize in one sport before the age of 12? And so this can kind of quantify, are they low, moderate, high, or extremely specialized, depending on how many yes responses they had to that. So I screen for this with my younger athletes. I work with a lot of youth baseball players. And so, seeing that overused shoulder elbow injury, I'm having this conversation with parents a lot. And I'm really fortunate that the baseball program that I work with is really good at identifying and, getting these kids to me for screenings because they know it's common, but not normal. Right. And definitely something that needs to be checked out. And then having conversations surrounding mitigating this injury risk. And so like talking about how many hours per week are you training in your sport? How old are you? How many injuries have you had in the past? Are you still growing and developing? Do you have a history of growth plate injuries or stress fractures and things like that? And so if that is the case, having these conversations with the parents and the players on, are you still playing other sports? How much time can we start taking off? And how much free play are you doing, especially in those younger under 12 kids? Like, are they only like in the batting cages and on the mounds like 6-7 days a week, or are they like actually playing out in the yard and like doing other sports? Because we know that early diversification and working on physical literacy is going to help them develop more athletic movement skills long term, and rather than just doing purely skill-based training. And so it's a really important conversation to have and also be aware of and screening for. And if you got to talk to those coaches who don't want to buy into it, it's easy. It's like, do you want a lot of kids hurt and not paying you because they can't come to practice because they have to sit out for 6 weeks? Or do you want to help them, empower them with, built-in time off and rest breaks or building in different type of training when they're coming in to see you so that they can stay healthy and keep playing longer?
Yeah, some great insight and great inroads to having these conversations. I'm excited to get this out to people, students, parents, coaches, therapists, whoever, because I think these are the critical conversations, and to hear them from experts is even more so, right? Like we can drive this home simply by saying, like, we need to listen to this, we need to pay attention to this. I spent a long time in baseball and just was lucky enough to have one of my mentors and colleagues on this podcast. He's the assistant trainer with the Atlanta Braves, and we're doing sort of an education series on Tommy John surgeries, and we talked on this as like Tommy John is not an acute injury, although it's seemingly that way in the media, like it happens that one throw and then boom, okay, maybe that happened, but like typically that's just the tip of the iceberg. This was been building for a long time. In your opinion, volleyball, tennis, baseball, I think these are the three specializations, Kristin with volleyball and Kayla tennis and baseball. The conversations that I am now attempting to have are very much driven to what else can we do other than throwing a baseball or hitting a volleyball or hitting a tennis ball to get better at that sport. And there are plenty of options, right? So I think this is it, overuse and specialization and these kinds of things. We need to open up those channels, and you touched on it, Kayla, like physical literacy. So breaking that down a little further, Kristin, working with those tweens and teenagers, like, is there some emphasis put on that in your practice as well, in terms of like diversifying what practice looks like? Because even for me, I ended up doing my master's, and my master's was in an epidemiological review of knee injuries in a varsity population in Canada. And I looked at this and I said, like, and then somebody asked in my dissertation or whatever, they were asking, what do you think the reasons are for all these injuries? And I said, like, it's multifactorial, but the one thing that jumps out experientially as a practitioner and hearing the intakes and as part of the intake physicals and things like that is like the transition from high school to university sport, even if it is Canadian football or Canadian basketball. The athletes, the humans, are undertrained for the requirements of the sport. Like, you're now asking them to do a whole bunch more hours, plus they have school, plus they have all those changes going on in their life and the psychosocial, emotional components. So Kristin, with the tweens and teens, like, is there diversification in terms of how you deliver and talking to coaches and what you're hearing and seeing working with this demographic now as well? Do you feel like it might be changing from when you went through, or was it diverse enough while you were going through?
I think that, yeah, I do think that things are changing. I think so I do have a lot of like volleyball I wouldn't say is super bad for like high training volume at like the youth level. Like I don't often have too many volleyball players that are training an excessive amount. Typically they'd just be practicing a couple times a week with maybe like maybe a little bit more when high school is on, but it's not as bad as some of the other sports. Like I do have like young hockey players and swimmers that can kind of that are training quite a bit, and I do think that I see more now that they are building in other sports into their actual like team training. So they will have, like for hockey, like they will do some other activities to try and build some of those other skills. Like if I do have, like, let's say a hockey player come in, like I will check and see what they're running and they're throwing and those sort of things are looking like, because they're not necessarily practicing those a ton. And I might give them something that doesn't necessarily look exactly like their sport, but is to help them develop, that physical literacy. I'm not really sure if I'm answering the question, but I think one thing that you touched on that I do think is interesting and was a good point is that when you move up to that higher level, that people aren't really prepared for that increase. Like, so moving from like for me, from high school club volleyball to varsity, when you're practicing like 8 hours a day for 3 weeks straight with like not really a day off, like no one's really prepared for that kind of transition. Yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on that.
And that's when you can kind of even get into the whole can of worms on like load management and training volume and acute to chronic workload ratios. Like that's a whole nother thing. But I think the way that sports are structured often aren't allowing kids to have varied sports environments or the ability to do like sports diversification or sports sampling, because the way that, at least in the US, sports are structured in a year-round model with a club team, or maybe kids are playing on 2 club teams, which is even worse because they literally have no breaks. And I think it's hard in the tennis world too, with the ranking system and how it's made up. It's hard for kids to play other sports because they have to maintain a certain ranking throughout a year. And so I think this is going to be a change that's going to be driven by more like sports governing bodies. And I think we're hearing about it more, we're talking about it more. There are more panels on early sports specialization, and the leading medical organizations are putting out these consensus statements and recommendations, and people are talking about it, but it's going to take a change at the foundation of these sports governing bodies to allow for early diversification and getting kids to play many different sports and not have to specialize later. That's going to help. And so there's still more research to be done. I think, in individual sports, there might be a benefit to specializing earlier. But then again, in the research, they found that, kids that maybe specialize earlier in team sports aren't getting injured as frequently as kids that are specializing in individual sports. And that's just because of the nature of their training environment and their competition environment. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think at the kid level, just getting parents to buy into, not going to super competitive sports early on, and then monitoring kids for burnout and fatigue, and creating fun environments for kids in sports so that they can feel confident in their bodies, develop those, like we said, physical literacy, movement skills, and taking away a lot of the competition where it's, maybe they're not having as many positive experiences in sports if there's, always a winner or loser, or those scenarios. So there's lots in there that we can keep working on.
100%. And I love the fact that you guys are both chipping away at this in your own manner and doing this from experience. Again, like lived experience creates amazing practitioners, both from, the injury recovery standpoint, as well as, here's the things that worked, here's the things that didn't work in my life. I've led this path, so let me help guide you on yours. It is still your path. And I think coming back around to the specialization piece is like really hammering home that this little child, she's not just a small adult. She is a child, so let's treat her as such. And I think that's something that parents can sometimes resonate with, but at the same time, it's almost like this is how some organizations distinguish themselves, by how much on ice time they have or how much on field time they have, and like, this is the program you need to be in because we're going to get you where you want to go, kind of thing. But some really, really interesting talking points, and it's Friday afternoon. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate.
Say one more thing?
No, absolutely.
This came to me when you were talking about like, putting the human back into like what we do. And so I think, taking away from the whole competitive sports thing with our younger athletes, and, you're treating that human in front of you. And in some of Dr. Janthi's research, he's found that kids that are sampling sports and playing many different sports as youth, they're more likely to be active adults later in life. And that's ultimately what we want. Like, not everyone's going to be a professional athlete for their entire life. It's great if you can play in high school. It's great if you go on and play in college. But then after that, we're all just going to become, recreational athletes. We're not necessarily all going to be competitive professionals. And so if we can just keep giving kids those positive experiences in sport, that are going to help them long term just be physically active human beings, I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I love it. That's amazing insight. And before we wrap up, Kristin, Kayla, again, thank you so much for being here. It's a special edition of Let's Chat, brought to you as always by First Start Therapy, Mobility Tape, and in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapy Association. Where can we reach you, Kristin, and any final sort of closing words? And please, anybody who's listening, again, always appreciative of the time and the takes on this, reach out to Kristin, reach out to Kayla, two amazing resources resources, whether it's through the posts on social media or connecting through this conversation and allowing it to resonate. But Kristin, where can people find you and reach you?
So I'm at www.eastmillphysio.ca, and then on Instagram, kristinbignell.pt, and Kristin spelled with an IN, and also Ace Performance. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation. If anyone has any questions or anything, I'm happy to chat. I also did this. I forgot to say this.
Please.
I wrote an ebook this year, and it is all about working with female athletes. And it's kind of, the audience is more so for the female athlete, but there is a lot of information in there that, especially if you're a healthcare provider that's not used to kind of navigating some of these questions, there's a lot of good information in there, based on some of the research that I have done last year.
Okay, where can we find it?
It's on my website, so
www.eastmillphysio.ca.
Outstanding. Thank you, Kayla, and yourself. Again, thank you for being here. Where can people find you, and any closing thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So you can find me on social media at The Athlete Connection, or online at theathleteconnectionpt.com. And I'm looking forward to continuing to kind of grow my PT practice, but also tennis medicine offerings. So serving tennis players specifically through tennishealthpro.com if you want to check that out. I just love connecting with other passionate individuals, and would love to connect with you. And if you're a student wanting to pursue sports physical therapy, feel free to reach out. And also if you're a PT wanting to kind of create your own career and dive into entrepreneurship, I'd love to chat with you too. So thanks again for having me.
Awesome. No, thank you for being here. I love the pun on serving tennis athletes. Well done. That's like a Ron McLean special on CBC Hockey Night in Canada. Always clever on the close. I really appreciate your time, guys. Thank you once again, Kayla Epperson, Kristin Bignell. Amazing resources. Please reach out to them. You can connect to them through me as well. The handle is at firststar.therapy on the social medias, and consult at firststartherapy.com should you wish to go the email route. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great afternoon, a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult at firststartherapy.com, CONSULT at firststartherapy.com, on Instagram at firststar.therapy, and our podcast host at letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.